It's been good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Busy. Same, just taking photos and traveling. And yeah,
Where have you
my
gone
son
this summer?
starts. Oh, where have I gone this summer? I didn't really do much. Like I did lots of photo projects this
Yeah.
summer just around Alberta, but I did go to the Grand Canyon this summer for a trip with my husband and my son.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's 18, so he starts university on next week.
Next week. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone's back to school. Life is back to normal.
Yes.
Is he excited?
I don't know. I don't know if he's excited. We'll see.
No, that's awesome. I've always wanted to go to the Grand Canyon. How was that for an adventure?
It it was good. Yeah, I was there. There was a lightning storm that day we were there, so I was able to capture some cool photos. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was good.
Do you
Yeah,
shoot on Canon or?
I Canon. Yeah, for the Olympics, I use Sony,
Nice.
um, just because that's what the team was using. But yeah, I just started on Canon when I started when I was 16, and I haven't stopped. But any cameras, they're all good.
Oh yeah. Especially now, you just kind of find what you love and just go with the flow. Yeah.
Yeah,
And you almost got to stick with it because God, lenses are expensive.
I know. All of cameras expensive. All of cameras are expensive.
When it comes to cameras, a body itself, if somebody wants to purchase one, do they just get a T3 Rebel to start, or do you need to go to I think it's Mark II or whatever it is,
Yeah,
the
I don't
Canon
know.
D? Is that still
Yes,
relevant?
he yeah, I mean, it depends. I like I said, any camera's good. So like an entry level camera these days
Mhm.
it's really it's good.
Yeah.
It just depends what you want to do. Yeah, like I mean, I photograph and I use my iPhone sometimes, right? Like
Yeah.
the iPhone's a good camera too.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah,
A
it's just
quick
whatever
capture.
camera you have with you. Yeah. I don't recommend spending a lot of money on a camera
Right.
if you don't know what you're like if you don't want to do it as a, a profession, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
More of a hobby for just enjoying it or for Instagram. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yep.
The reason though for DSLR is so you could potentially blow it up into a huge image. Is that true?
No, I mean the DSLRs are good because you can use different lenses,
Of
right?
course. Yeah.
You can blow up. I mean, when I started using DSLRs, I think they were like 1 megapixel
Oh
and we
my
still blew
goodness.
them up. But like the phone I have, I think it's 12 megapixels. You can blow up a pretty decent sized photo from that as well.
Oh yeah. So times surely have changed, haven't they? Yeah.
Yes.
So you started your career, 20 years in the photojournalism aspect. How is that as a career?
It's honestly, it's been the best.
Yeah.
I love it. I love what I do. It's a job like everything. There's, ups and downs, but I am so lucky and privileged
Right.
that I couldn't picture myself doing anything else. I couldn't see myself doing anything else. But yeah, I started when I was 16 in high school, just on a work experience with the Calgary Sun,
Mhm.
and it just kind of progressed. Went to the Calgary Herald, went to SAIT, photojournalism, but no, I love it. I get to go behind the scenes and have, this front row view of history.
It's beautiful. You've seen the Calgary Herald building itself change.
Yes, yes, it's changed. I think it's for sale.
Yeah.
I don't know if it is or yeah, but yeah, lots of stuff has changed. I mean, now the Calgary Sun and the Calgary Herald are the same, right? They're
Hmm.
together. So
Yeah.
Postmedia has bought. Yeah, so I saw that change. I started my career at the Sun, and it was very competitive with the Calgary Herald, and then I went to the Herald, and yeah.
My goodness. And you've seen the city, of course, change over time in terms of not only from sports, as you've highlighted, Olympics, many of them, um, but just in general, seeing crime, seeing buildings change, people,
Yeah,
style. And if you look over the years, it's just probably so unique, isn't it?
it is. Yeah, I can think of, when I really got into photography, it would have been like 1995, 96.
Right.
So yeah, the city has changed drastically since then.
Mm.
My profession has changed a lot since there. I started, with analog cameras, film, and now it's digital. My profession has changed that there's more women in the industry, not as many as there could be, but it's changed.
Yeah.
It's slowly changing.
It's interesting to see, how gender plays such a role in stuff like that when it's like hey, you got an eye, if you got that talent, it could be
Mm-hmm.
anybody, right? It could,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but it's nice to see a change in things, and which is bizarre to me because I think it's like, why did there ever have to be a weird gap in life?
I know.
I'm not
Yeah.
going down that road on the podcast.
Yeah, no, don't.
So when you started analog, with analog, sorry, you'd go to a place, take a photo, come back to the headquarters, process that image, and get it ready for the papers.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
My goodness.
I mean, and when I really started, I remember I was working at the Red Deer paper on a weekend,
Hmm.
and we had to develop the film, right? Like in a dark room in the reels, just like, yeah, it's so much easier now on deadlines.
I bet. And in terms of just transferring that, just plug it in, boom, send it off.
Yeah, yeah, it's made our jobs a lot easier for sure.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Actually, you don't even have to now put your memory card in. You could literally connect your camera to your phone as well, or vice
Yes.
versa.
Yep. Or you don't even have to connect it to the phone, right? That you could just send it through your camera, like FTP it
Yeah.
from the camera, plug it in. Yeah.
Blows my
Send it back
mind.
to a photo editor on a desk, and you don't even, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. How did you know, though, oftentimes that you got the right shot, especially with analog, because you'd capture that moment. And, we look at our family photos, and obviously there's that one relative or ourselves with our eyes closed.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, back in film days, you would take it back, right? You would, after you develop the film, you would look through it and notch the one that worked. But yeah, nowadays, like you said, it's easier. It's,
Hmm.
yeah, but in terms of if you have the photo or not, you could tell if there's something there, right?
Yeah.
Just composition or
Oh, for sure. Do you miss the days of analog, or do you still
not
play
at
with it?
all.
No?
I know George Weber, who you had on,
Yes.
he does it, yeah, and he's great. But I don't miss film. I have film cameras. I haven't picked them up. I don't at all. Being in the darkroom is nice, and seeing your photo, like making prints and developing them, is amazing. It's a neat, it's fun, but for what I do, I don't miss it at all. I like seeing it right away, editing, spending less time inside and more out,
Right,
documenting stories.
for sure. You have a passion. I mean, your first book was on rural Alberta.
Mm.
How did that happen, and where did that love come from? Because obviously you're a native Calgarian, aren't you?
I am. I'm one of, like, I think the few, right?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, born and raised in Calgary, but my dad is from a farm
Right.
in central Alberta, Stettler.
Hmm.
And so I spent my summers and weekends up at the farm, and that's kind of where that love of the rural life kind of came from, and
Right.
seeing where our food comes from and stuff like that. So it's a continuing. I've been documenting rural life for a long time. I should not forever, but it's a project that I'm not going to stop. So I just like documenting all the different communities that we have in Alberta, right? You know, the Western life, the Indigenous communities, Hutterite colonies, just everything. It's fascinating. Like photography, photojournalism specifically, has let me into a lot of different communities that I wouldn't otherwise probably go see. I
When you
pick my
look,
projects if I want to learn about something new, right? That's how I pick them.
when you look at the history of your documentation throughout the years, have you seen the culture or heritage and history change or evolve, or has the Albertan roots really stayed solid?
I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, I guess it's changed, but like, when I go out to some of the ranches, like how, during branding season, they've been doing it the same as they have for over 100 years. So that hasn't really changed, right, on horseback and stuff. But and all the communities, like one ranch I go to, they have their neighbors come and help them. So the Hutterite
Mm.
colony come and help them, the Indigenous community come and help them, and these communities all work together, um, which I think is fantastic. So I don't know if that has changed that much. Yeah.
No, that's pretty cool. And then during this time, you switched, in a way, careers, or I guess a position to the,
Position. Yeah.
yeah,
Same career.
same career to the AHS. For the listeners, that's the Alberta Health Services. Was that prior to the pandemic, or was it just they moved you because it was the pandemic?
No, so I left the Calgary Herald in 2019. I'd
Okay.
been there 19 years, 18 years or something. A job opportunity came up at Alberta Health Services for a photographer.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved the work that I did at the Herald, but I think, I'm in my 40s and I was just looking for something. I wanted to expand my skill set. And so I jumped at this opportunity, not knowing that I went to AHS in 2019, not knowing that a year later, exactly like March 2019, I started, and then March 2020, we had our first case of COVID in Alberta. But yeah, I didn't know that I was going to be,
Right.
on the front lines during COVID. So I went a year before COVID, just documenting all the stories that happened in a hospital, right? Like the good stories of what the healthcare workers are doing, patients. And then, COVID hit March 2020 and
Was it a fulfilling thing prior to the pandemic of you switching careers? Did you know at that time I made a right career move? This is pretty amazing to share these stories of doctors and patients and success stories and the heartbreaks.
yeah, that's a good question, because I remember when I left the Calgary Sun to go to the Herald, I went for a walk around the block. Should I leave to go to the paper? And I did, and it worked out great. And I did the same thing. If I left the Herald and, leaving newspapers full time to like a different job still as a full-time photojournalist, photographer,
Mm-hmm.
or documentary photographer in this case. But yeah, I didn't know. I just took a leap of faith, and I have a supportive family, but it did work out. I get bored easily. So I like to keep,
It's our
learning new
creative
things.
minds, right?
It is, and it's hard. And when you're creative, and someone said it best too, is like going to with COVID hitting and stuff. I'm totally jumping around now. I still freelance on the side, right? So I still freelance for the Globe and Mail, CBC, the Narwhal, whoever, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
the Canadian Olympic Committee. I still have like a client base like that, but like being now at AHS and seeing the front lines of COVID and healthcare, I I just learned so much. I just learned
Mm-hmm.
so many fascinating things. And there's tragedies and sad stories too, but yeah, I think having like doing this book Alone Together, I hope it shows people just like a behind the scenes of healthcare.
Why the title Alone Together?
So my publisher and I, Rocky Mountain Books, came up with that title. Same with the previous book,
Mm-hmm.
Along the Western Front. But it's kind of like we were all alone, right? Like some of us were isolating, some of us, but we were still all together. So we kind of it was a play on words that way.
Yeah, no, it's a great play on the words. It's interesting to see is, at that time in March 2020, we're all human beings. We all do not know what's going on in our world. We're scared and every emotion you can imagine. Is our jobs on the line? What's going on? And everyone had to stay home, and there was all these things going on. During that time, when you're documenting these things, were you afraid because you did not know also what was going on?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is, I think I've said it before, but this is the first I've worked on a lot of very big news stories in my career. But this is the first story where I can't just leave it.
Leah, first, for the listeners, what's some of the stories you've done?
Oh, now you're gonna, geez, I've been, I covered Humboldt, a lot of local big news stories that have happened in the city, homicides, like stuff like that. I've been overseas covering stories. I followed a family that adopted a little boy from Ethiopia. But yeah, so stuff like that. So, but I was always able, of the 2013
Mm-hmm.
floods, and but for example, in the floods, I was able to go home and my home wasn't flooded and I was fine. I didn't lose anyone or anything.
Mm-hmm.
But this COVID, the pandemic, I was dealing with it on a personal level. I was scared of getting sick and giving it to my loved ones. Yeah, I couldn't just leave it. I was also dealing with, my son was now doing online school for grade 10, 11, and 12. So yeah, it was one of the ones that, yeah, everyone was dealing with it. No
Mhm.
matter what you thought of COVID, whatever side you're on, everyone was affected by the
Mhm.
pandemic.
It was so hard. I mean, my thoughts were going out to all the reporters as well. They're every day giving out the numbers and this and that, and it probably trickles down to their team, the cameraman, to the photographer. It's everybody's. It's like
Yeah.
constant because as somebody that's absorbing it, we could turn it off after a while, but they had to
Yeah, and
constantly be.
exactly. And that's like media couldn't turn it off. Healthcare workers couldn't turn it off. And you have to remember, the nurses, the respiratory therapists, the porters, the doctors, they're all dealing with it as well on their personal life, in their personal
Mhm.
lives, and also trying to save lives. So yeah, it was,
Well, we
but
heard
there was a lot of
stories.
amazing stuff that
Yeah.
happened too.
And I'm excited for that. We heard stories though during that time of individuals that would work at the hospitals, come home, and then they had to sleep in their garage early on.
So it's funny you brought that up. I shouldn't say funny. It's, I know, but in the beginning, that's what I was worried too. So, I'd come home and I'd like take off my clothes in the garage, put on a house coat, run down and have a shower because I was worried about my family getting it. Like,
Right.
don't hug me until after, Um, but yeah, I had a pair of COVID shoes, I call them,
Yeah.
some pair of Vans that I had, and I threw them out like, I think a couple months ago,
Yeah. You're like,
just like they
so
were the
long.
ones I wore to the hospital.
During that time, you said there was some
I,
some fun
yeah,
times. I don't know if I
fun
want to.
times, but I don't even know great, but like there was like there, I think it also for me, I got to spend more time with my son, right? Like I wouldn't go into the office to edit photos or anything. So I'd come home like in my office where my son would be doing his schoolwork. We got to spend more family time, even though everyone was working. But there was drive-in movie theaters. Now, younger kids know what a drive-in movie theater is. People just adapted, and they did it in unique ways. Drive-in concerts.
Hmm.
Um, I photographed drive-through Eid celebration. People just adapted, and it was, to me as a photographer, that was just amazing to see, and amazing to photograph. Like there was photos everywhere at this time, even the circles in the parks, right, for
Yes.
social distancing, the arrows in the grocery stores. Yeah, just when I look back, those photos are so historical, but it also shows us what we were, 100 years from now, what are people going to think when they look at those photos?
And I'm so happy that you documented it because we never got to see the insides of the hospitals, and what you do document is really neat, like you said, capturing that grocery store and looking down those arrows. You're right, when
Yeah.
are we going to see that again? That was interesting for all of us to see. And then it was interesting to see how humans were able to navigate, yet some were graceful, some weren't, and some were annoyed, some weren't, but we got through it. And looking back, it seems so long ago, doesn't it?
It does. It seems like, yeah, like I put it in perspective when I talk about my son, because COVID started again. He's grade 10. Now he's going to university. Like, where did those years go?
Oh my God. I guess, yeah, if you look at it like that, holy
Yeah. And it's just like, but it was like, yeah, I
he had a
lost my train of
pandemic
thought.
high school.
A pandemic high school. Yes. Yeah.
And that must have been interesting. But you know what? I'm so happy that you're grateful to see that there were silver linings in all this and
I think you
count the
have to.
blessings.
Yeah. And I think you have to, because, like, in the beginning, and I saw some just, such sadness in the hospitals, when someone dies and their loved ones are phoned and it's from COVID, and you see how there were so many deaths, and how it affects the staff, right? The healthcare workers, and just those moments are yeah, just sad. Like I feel for everyone. I feel for the families, the patients, and I met a lot of families and patients that allowed me to be there for those moments. But I'm very upfront when I approach people, right? For any
Yeah.
documentary project I do, so that they know, where the photos are going to go and why I want to do this.
Right. Did you know you were going
Yeah,
to write a book?
no,
No.
not at all. No. I think I was, because I had done the first book with Rocky Mountain Book Publishers, that after we had talked, and I was like, I wanted to give something back to the healthcare workers, to Albertans, patients and their
Hmm.
families, just to give them something tangible to have, just to try and say thank you. Because I feel like in my career, I keep taking, right? Like I take photos all the time. I have nothing really to give them back to say thank you. I mean, there'd be no book without someone saying yes to allow me into their life. So it's just a way, yeah.
Yeah.
And all the proceeds from the book don't go to me. So none of the money is going to me. All the proceeds of the book sales go to help the foundation supporting the work of Alberta Health Services.
And thank you for that.
Yeah. But I mean, the Western book, those probably, you can buy that. That goes to me. Yeah.
That's awesome. Are you still with AHS? Are you
I
still?
am.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
No, that's great. My mom passed away in 2019, August 2019. At She had just turned 55 at
So
Foothills.
young.
Yes, it was very young, and we had, I don't know, 6 months and whatever. And yeah, and then the pandemic hits. Your mom was your pillar, as your boy would say that too, mom's mom. Um, Even though sometimes we drive them crazy. But I was looking back at it all, and I got to be grateful. Find the silver linings that actually I've said in many other times in podcasts where, you know what, um, I didn't. I got the chance to sit with my mom,
Yeah.
and a lot of people did not during the pandemic. And obviously, you saw it firsthand. Saying goodbye on an iPad, we saw that on the news a lot, or I don't even know. I would want to be by my mom's side, but a lot of people could not. And that feeling, that tear, not only for the family, but that individual that's now passing on, that dignity of that person,
Yeah.
that they have to leave this world alone, it is a
And for the
scary time.
staff too, right? Like for the nurses or the doctor who are the ones now holding that loved one's hand, right? Like that's scarring to them to see that so many times.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it's hard. Like you said, like even funerals, right? Like,
Yes.
you know, my mom passed away in 2004. My brother passed away and he died 2017. And we had big funerals, big family gatherings. And my heart went out to the people who couldn't have that
Right.
during the pandemic,
Hmm.
right? Yeah, I photographed a lovely woman, Christine, who came in and she was pregnant, had COVID, um, and was intubated, and they had to do an emergency C-section on her baby. They're both thankfully okay, but she woke up after recovering, thinking she was still pregnant, and the staff had to tell her, right? Like, and then she
Hmm.
didn't get to see her little one except on an iPad for a couple of weeks. So yeah, the trauma of dealing with that
Hmm.
for that family, for the staff that were there too to see that. Yeah, it was hard.
How did you handle your emotions? Because I'm sure seeing these things, you come home, it's like, how do you unwind from it all? Because now you're also, and people don't realize this, as a videographer or a photographer or even a podcaster, we got to replay this content to edit it.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, it's hard. I'm I'm human, and it's sad. Like I cried too.
Yeah.
I probably haven't dealt with it as much as I should, and lots of us journalists talk about, we'll probably deal with something that happened now 10 years from now.
Yeah.
You'll think about, you kind of put up a little bit of defense. But I have a really good family. My husband's a writer, and he was in media, sports writing. So yeah, I can come home and we could talk about it and stuff. And I
No,
have really good friends, colleagues that I can talk about it with, that, yeah,
isn't that important?
it's
People to
super
talk. Yeah.
important. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And not holding it
definitely.
in. Yeah.
Yeah. And I also think about it. I'm standing there documenting someone's worst moment. And I just keep thinking it's worse for them. That loved one is seeing their family die. I'm still disconnected. Yes, I see it, but it's not directly happening to me. So that helps me deal with some stuff, right?
What was one of your toughest moments? Because obviously, as a photojournalist, you've seen things in the past prior to the pandemic. So, homicides where you can see it from a distance or whatever, but you start building this calluses almost on your mind of, what you can handle, what you can't. Um, Being in that situation at the hospital, that's a whole different ball game now. And you're
Yeah, I think,
surrounded by it. You can't
yeah,
escape.
yeah. I think it was the first, I documented before the pandemic for a magazine affiliated with the Herald, Swerve magazine.
Oh,
A
yes.
writer and I documented uh, maid, physician assisted. The fellow PJ wanted myself and the writer to be there. And so I had documented, that was my first moment seeing someone die in front of me. I had just missed, my mom had died of cancer and I had showed up at the hospital just after.
Oh,
And my brother had a heart attack. I didn't see him die. So this is the first time I saw someone physically die in front of me, take their last breath. And yeah, that was hard. I felt privileged that this person wanted me to be there. And so I think going into COVID, I was like, I can handle this. I've seen it. But that first patient that I documented, and I met him when he came into the emergency room and we talked, and then I met him on the COVID unit, explained what I was going to do. His name's Chuck. He's in the book. And because I'm with AHS, they do have to sign a consent form to say I could take their photos. And I explained to it and he had consented. And not knowing how this was going to turn out, he reminded me of my dad. I think Chuck was 75, 76, showed me a picture that his granddaughter had done for him, a little drawing that he had up in his hospital room, and we chatted. He was getting progressively worse. That night I left and they had talked about intubating him and bringing him into the ICU. I came back the next day and they had brought him into the ICU, and then I met his wife, Dixie. And that family, unfortunately, Chuck, they didn't have the outcome that they had all hoped for, and he died. But yeah, that one hit me hard because I was like, this could be my dad. And I thought I was okay, and I've kept in touch. That's the other thing. I keep in touch a lot with the people I photograph because they're just great people that I have taken these photos of, the patients in the hospitals and the staff. We've become, some of us have become friends. But yeah, that first patient that I saw, he died, and that was hard.
of course. And
And
you
just seeing how it
realize,
affect the family, and because I've been through people dying in my family fairly recently, I know that the grief is not, it just doesn't stop there. It's just this ongoing,
oh yeah, it'll come in
life.
waves. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you think of your mom or your brother almost every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, but then there was like outcomes where I saw Bernie, who he was in the media a lot because AHS shared the photos I had taken with media so that they could get them out to the public. But Bernie, he survived. He came out of the ICU, and that was like, it was a good, hopeful story.
Yeah. Did you see any patients pass away alone without their loved ones because they couldn't be there?
So yes, some of them, the sad thing is that some people, because you couldn't fly, right, during the pandemic.
Yes.
So some families lived in Ontario and they couldn't get, right. So you saw a lot of that, or people just didn't make it in time.
Yeah. Did you see the iPad?
Yep, because that's the in the book, there's the iPad
Yeah.
Zoom meeting
Which
with a
I've seen.
couple
Yeah.
patients. Yeah. So there's some of those, seeing like Christine seeing her baby for the first time on the iPad and stuff.
Of course. Yeah.
But like, I keep thinking too, like, some of the, like, I go back to the staff just because I was so in it with the staff and how that affects them. Yeah.
Do you feel like there's still trauma?
Oh, yes. Yeah, definitely. I think with everyone, with the whole world, right? There's still, a lot of mental health issues that have come out during COVID, right? The trauma
Yeah.
and how people deal with it.
You know what I think it is the fear of the unknown now. It scares people and
Yes.
messes with people's minds. Well, we're heading into fall. Does this mean we're gonna all get sick again? Is there gonna be another lockdown? Because the amount of times that happened was very hard for the human soul.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's only so much pain we could all bear at the time. So,
That's so true. I think in my career, it has helped me deal with stuff like this because, as a photographer, photojournalist, or working in newspapers or AHS or wherever,
mhm.
my day is always different. I don't know sometimes what's going to happen. So I live in the unknown of what tomorrow is. Maybe tomorrow I'm in a hot air balloon taking photos, right? Like maybe I'm flying wherever or going to India or something. So
That's
I
crazy.
kind of live in those unknowns, which I kind of like.
It helps. It stimulates your mindset, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
What was some of the coolest places you've been,
Oh.
or things you've captured over the years, non-COVID related?
Well, the Olympics is always very
Yeah.
cool. I mean, I covered two pandemic Olympics, which was very different, right? Tokyo and Beijing.
Yeah.
Living in the bubble and all that stuff. Those were, yeah, drastically different Olympics from, I covered Sochi in 2014, um, Moscow. I went to Moscow, and
Mike.
um, yeah, I think, one of my favorite trips is I went to Sudan with a reporter when we were at the Herald, Emma, and that was probably one of my favorite trips. And my photos are terrible from it. It was back in 2002, but just the people we met, it was fantastic.
I was born in East Africa in Tanzania.
Oh, I'd
Yeah.
love to go there.
I haven't gone back, but I was born there, 4 months old, came to Calgary, and never gone back. But my mom's brother's still there. I need to go back.
You need to go.
I
Yeah,
do.
you need a photographer.
I do. Document.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I went on a family trip before my mom died. We went to Estonia because my dad's family is from Estonia, so we went to
Oh,
the Baltics there and visited and stuff. But yeah, I love traveling. I love being immersed in new cultures.
yeah. Are you still open to traveling despite COVID?
Oh yeah, yeah. I follow all the precautions, I'm vaccinated. Yeah, I'm still for travel. Yeah.
No, that's
I'm
super
actually
neat.
going to Tofino on the weekend for a wedding. So,
So that is my dream place. I
oh,
went in
interesting.
2019, grew up going there every summer. Isn't it beautiful out there?
It is, but I'm not a fan of the ocean.
Come on, really? Oh,
I'm a prairie girl.
you're a perfect.
I'm landlocked. It's nice to see. I could not live there.
No, oh no, it's cold.
Yes, although here's cold too, but
Yeah,
no, it's nice. But yeah, it is a beautiful part of the
yeah.
world, especially for a wedding.
Are you doing any new books or new projects coming up that we can look forward to seeing?
So, yeah, like I'm doing a project right now on dementia and Alzheimer's. It's a work project and a personal project. Just my father-in-law has dementia, so I've become, I want to say, more interested. I've just now I actually know I know what it I want to learn more about it. So I'm doing following a family that's dealing with that. And then I'm going out on Monday to the local Hutterite, one of the Hutterite colonies I go to, just to take some more photos. But
That's really neat though, because they're very private, aren't they?
they are, and I'm sure like George Weber told you
Hmm.
too, right? Like it's I've been going to some of the colonies for a long time too, but it's very private.
It's all
Um
based on trust, isn't it? And how you have to.
yes, yes. And I go a lot of times to lots of projects where I don't take photos. But yeah, I have, I've been following a Syrian family who came, oh, was that 2017 when lots of the families first came, the Syrian refugees. So I've been
Oh
following this
yes.
family who farm out east of Calgary. I've been following them for a long time, for, what is that? I'm terrible at math. That's why I'm a photographer. Is that 5 years? So I'm following them as well. So there's the thing I love about being a journalist, a photojournalist, is you can kind of choose your own adventure, as one of my friends says, right? I have so many ideas. Um, yeah, that I like, back at the paper or even at AHS would get assigned an assignment, which is great. But I like choosing my own too.
For sure. Sharing your books now with the world, the first one that got published, was it the same excitement as you have for the second one, or vice versa?
I don't know. You know what? Like I said to you before, it's hard for me to talk about my work.
Yeah, I know.
And it's hard to put your work out there because I've said this before, like I've been doing this a long time, but I'm still learning. And so I'm not really a perfectionist, but when I look back at the photos, I always think I should have done this, or the light looked better, so I don't like looking at it.
Mhm.
I don't have a lot of photos of mine printed on the wall.
Right.
I just, yeah, so it was exciting to give to the people in the book. It was exciting to see, you know, people I photographed be excited about being in a book, right? So
Mm.
that's where I got my excitement from. But yeah.
I mean, just even going through your book, it made me think, this seems like a different life. This was a different lifetime ago. Like, it's insane. Now, tell me this, Leah, before we get going here. Why black and white?
So I personally love black and white.
Mhm.
I always have. But when you photograph in black and white, it kind of, and instead of color, it strips away right to the composition, right? When you're doing a portrait of someone, instead of your eye going to the color, you're going to, like, the content of the photo. For the pandemic in the hospitals, we got used to here in Alberta people wearing, the PPE, and it was the yellow, right? Like the yellow gowns. And I find that so distracting. So this, it goes right to the, yeah, right to the, strips it down right to the content.
It's unreal. I mean, even the photos of here's the Q-tip in the car or whatever they're passing to that individual.
Oh, that must have been, was that the Ash Wednesday when they were putting the crosses, or the COVID swab?
COVID swab. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was from a
Yeah.
distance and they had some,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It does. It seems like when I look, yeah, those first, I remember being in that testing site on Richmond Road. It's the old Children's
Old
Hospital
children's,
building.
okay, yes.
Yeah. And I remember that first few days in March or April of 2020. I can't remember, but I just remember being like, this is so surreal. Like, like it was so bizarre just to be, yeah.
Seeing a drive-through of this, yeah, it's not.
Yeah. And just, and photos, because I'm not a big writer and I don't like journaling, but photos help. It's like my visual diary of what has happened. And it's bizarre when I look back and I can remember, exactly what that day was like.
Right. Do you use Lightroom to edit your photos?
Sometimes, mostly Photoshop,
Yeah.
Camera Raw. But yeah, I do use Lightroom.
Yeah.
I'm not good at Photoshop. And the beauty of being a photojournalist is we can't do a lot of Photoshop, right? Like this
Because
is
it's
real,
real.
authentic photos. So I can't take anything out. I can't add anything in. So yeah, it's just real.
I love that you have that in Fish Creek Park when we had the Bow Valley Ranch, the restaurants with the domes.
Oh yes,
That was
yes.
neat. I was
Yeah,
there, so I
yeah.
remember that. I was like, ah.
Yeah. And they actually did that before COVID. They actually had an event where they brought in those domes, but
Mm-hmm.
then during COVID, because the restaurant was closed, it was a perfect time to do it again,
I
right?
think you could sit with, there've been so many times of different rules, but I think that time that I had gone, you could only sit with your own household.
Yes.
So the dome made total sense.
Yeah. And then after, you can have people you cohort it with, but even those words, right? Like social distancing, like before COVID, who would ever, you never heard it really, right? Social distancing. What is that? It's interesting. It's like, yeah.
Do you remember
But
4 p.m.? We all had to like wonder, oh my God, did you hear what happened? What's going on at 4 p.m.?
oh,
Because there
right,
was always
because
the
the
announcements,
updates.
updates.
Yes, yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the streets, like there's a photo in there of Stephen Avenue, like no traffic, which for me during COVID and my media colleagues and stuff like that, and the staff at the hospitals was great because there was no traffic for us to get to work or
Nope.
driving
Just
around. There was
fly
no
in.
rush hour. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah. I did walk Stephen Avenue during the pandemic, and it was It was interesting. It was eerie.
Yeah,
Actually, downtown itself was eerie, wasn't it?
it was. But you know what? Someone joked or something that Stephen Avenue, that area is always like that.
In terms of your project, so hopefully you'll have some new books coming out, I'm guessing.
Maybe, I don't know. I don't know if I have enough photos for new. Yeah, I don't know. I never think that way.
Yeah.
I
I
think
guess you
mostly
don't. You don't think of it that way.
no.
You think of it differently.
I mostly think like, what's the next project I can pitch to the Globe, or what's the next project I can pitch to the Narwhal or whatever. Like I think of it in those terms.
So
Yeah.
I guess for a photojournalist, do you have to create an idea or have an idea, go to them and say, this is what I want to document, or a story? Who would end up writing it, or would they pair you with a writer?
So good question. So for me, like
Yeah.
I think some photojournalists are different, and they could be called by the publication for and given an assignment. If you're freelance, right? If you're
Mhm.
staff, it's different. And I've been called to do an assignment on whatever, but I usually come up with my own ideas, and I'm not saying this is the right way to do it, but I usually just start documenting that whatever project. So the Syrian refugee farmers, I just started documenting them because I'm interested in it and I want to go take photos of them, and that's just what I do. So I start documenting it, and then I'll send a few photos and make a pitch. Sometimes I write. I don't like writing. I'm not very good.
All right.
I wrote a project at the Herald that I did when I followed a woman named Barbie Harris around. She was on and off living on the streets, just kind of going back and forth, and then she ended up getting cancer. So I wrote that story because I spent a year with Barbie. So yeah, it was that trust built up, and I had really good editors that could edit my writing. But yeah, I usually just if I pitch a photo story, then yeah,
And
I
then
usually
what would
try to get
happen
a
is
writer.
I don't have to
They
go
would
to
either say yes or no, and then if it needs a story, then they would assign one of their staff writers.
but it's like they would pay you based on the story itself. They'd say, oh, or is it for photos, or would they say, great idea, we'll buy your story almost, or is it we're buying your photos?
It's buying the photos. So there's already a
Ah,
set rate, right? So there's a day rate and half day rates, like publications already have set rates.
okay.
The newspaper business is totally different from the commercial side of
Right.
photography. Different pay scale, totally different rates.
With this whole world of going digital now, and anyone can open up their own magazine online, or all of these
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
changing,
they
isn't it?
can, but it's changing. But I still think photojournalism, there's a need for photojournalism and newspapers
I
and
agree.
stuff to, truthful and factual
Yeah. It's not
stories,
about
right?
getting there first, it's about getting the right story.
Yeah, and getting it right. And it's funny. The other day I saw a photo on, Instagram, and it was a photo of the tree down south. Is it the Burmese tree? The one
Oh,
It's like
yes.
a famous old tree.
Yeah.
Yes, but it's got it. Someone broke a branch, so there's a stick holding them up. But I've seen so many photos lately where people take the photo and they Photoshop the stick out, right where it's broken. But in photojournalism, that's not factual, right? It's what does it look like
Mhm.
now? That's photojournalism, right? To show like we can't Photoshop stuff out like that.
That's interesting. And I'm sure you do that with anything now because you're so used to that habit. You're like, this is what I want to shoot, and this is how it should look.
Yeah, and I think it's also we have to, at AHS, I don't. When I say don't Photoshop, I mean take something out or put something in. It's not fake. Photoshop is like if I change it to black and white from color, yes, that's
Right.
photoshopping, right? But at AHS, I still use those journalistic ethics. So the photos
Mm.
are real. That's exactly what I saw, and that's what happened.
Do you have to remove brands of car logos or whatever? Nothing, eh?
Nope, nope, no. If they're there, it's there, right? So yeah,
Interesting.
I
That's
think that's why I like photojournalism because it's so real. That's what it looked like when I was there.
well, thank you so much for this, Lee. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.